The honourable member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to commend my colleague for bringing this motion forward. I would argue, other than the affordability crisis that we're dealing with in this country right now, government's priority always has to be the defense and security of its citizens. And we obviously have a weakness when it comes to what we need to do to improve things in the Arctic. I'm looking forward to reading the whole report in great detail, considering my own past experience, but in particular with recommendation 3 around ballistic missile defense. I'd like to ask my colleague to expand, because it's more than just the ballistic missile defense. We're dealing with hypersonic missiles. We're dealing with other threats. We're seeing this coming out of the Ukraine war as they fight against Russia's illegal invasion. But we're seeing this in North Korea as well, as Russia, China, and other nations are putting increased technology into North Korea as they develop these capabilities. And I think it's absolutely essential that Canada invests appropriately and reconsiders our policy around how we're going to have an all-round air defense policy. I'd like my honourable colleague to expand on that, please.
Honorable député de Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Member for the question and for his service in Canada, both when he served in the CAF and also now as member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. So I thank him for his service and for the question. This recommendation is an important one. This is something that has been, there was a decision made in 2005, and the debate seemed settled for quite some time, but the threat environment has changed, and it's incredibly important that we can't remain stuck in an old threat environment as new ones emerge. So as we heard testimony during this study, Major General Michael Wright, Russia sees North America as a single target. Okay? We are part of a continental defense system with the United States, and it is, we're increasingly, and there are concerns in the United States about Canada's contribution to NATO and to its ensuring that Canada does its part to participate in continental defense.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Obviously, a very important topic that we're debating tonight. And the member made a number of key observations I think are for commitment on that committee. Recommendation 5 in particular talks about the risks from malign foreign actors, specifically in the Arctic. It can address the challenges around as the Arctic opens up more, and that scares me more than almost anything. I'm less worried about Russian intrusions into the Arctic. I'm more worried about Russian businesses, Chinese businesses, and other foreign state actors, challenging our natural resources, our critical minerals, and in particular, how it even impacts our indigenous population, or Inuit, in the north. Could the member just expand on what the committee found out a bit more on what actions need to be taken by the government to address this critical and important need?
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
I certainly appreciate the member's question. I would note that they are not our Indigenous peoples, so I warn them about that language. It's very, very important. The one thing that I would suggest is that when General Wayne Eyre specifically stated right at the get-go of this study that I see no real threat today to our territorial sovereignty, nor do I see one in the near future. So, yes, we have to be aware of what's going on in the world. Yes, we have to be concerned. But critically, what gives access to critical minerals, to that Northwest Passage, to communities in the north, to all of that is climate change. And that opening up of the passage and of those seaways is the existential threat. And we are not doing anything to address that adequately.
Comments, questions et commentaires? For Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Look, I'd love to give the member another chance to really kind of answer my first question, which is really about recommendation, developing a strategy for critical infrastructure investments and protecting Canadian interests from malign foreign actors, whether the committee had any additional information on that. And tied to the people, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of our Rangers and our Canadian Forces personnel. Currently, 8,000 under strength in our reserves, 8,000 under strength in our regular force, 10,000 under trained effective strength. This government needs to do more for our personnel in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Brief answer from the honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Well, absolutely, and actually, I think that this ties in a lot of the things that I just answered before with my honourable colleague from New Westminster Burnaby. But of course, this question in terms of how we treat our people, how we treat them as workers, how we treat them on the front lines, how we're treating the men and women who volunteer as Canadian Rangers, our search and rescue. This is all very important, and the investments in the people that are doing that incredible work is a key component of what I was trying to bring forward today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I'll stay relevant to the topic at hand tonight, but the member talked about that there wasn't, that he didn't feel that the Arctic sovereignty was that important. He talked, I think he should have listened to the NDP member that just spoke before him, and she actually spoke on November 3rd and got very upset when the complaints and the stuff that was coming from the House side, but I'm sure she'll maybe have an opportunity. And I do remember the member very well when he was on the National Defence Committee, when he successfully was filibustering, the looking into, by the previous Parliament, into sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces at the highest levels, and even the censorship of the previous Minister of National Defence. But I want to get to the point of this motion, which is around Arctic sovereignty, and in particular, he represents, or supposedly represents, a riding that represents the Canadian Armed Forces members in there, specifically around signals capability. Recommendation 24 talks about the needed expansion of very high-frequency radio capabilities and other communications in the Arctic to support search and rescue efforts. Could the member elaborate on what needs to be done and how the Canadian Armed Forces members in Kingston that he represents are crucial to making this happen in continuing our Arctic sovereignty?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I never said that Arctic sovereignty wasn't important, Madam Speaker. Quite the contrary. I said it was important. I said what my concern was that the Conservatives were just using this report as a way to block something that they didn't want to talk about. Something that they didn't want to talk about so badly, the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Deal, that they ended up voting against it later on. Arctic sovereignty is extremely important, Madam Speaker. I don't believe I was on the committee, and I don't believe I filibustered in the reference that he made. But what I will say is that when I was on the committee and we studied it, we looked into the various different recommendations or the various different things that we could recommend to the government. And when it comes to recommendation 24, I would have him note that the government of Canada agrees in principle with these recommendations. Nobody is disagreeing. And this is my point, Madam Speaker, is that why is it so important that we talk about this report on the floor of the House of Commons when the reality is that the government agrees with the majority of the report?
The honourable member Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My honourable colleague, a huge advocate and defender of our military personnel in Ukraine, but he mentioned drones. In particular, he mentioned the delay of our medium-altitude drones by the government that's being delayed. You could argue for a good reason if it's to ensure that the development for Arctic capability is there. My question is, I'm a bit surprised considering this is something that they promised within their defense policy years ago. Why would they think you develop a drone capability in this country that wouldn't be Arctic capable? And if you could just expand on why the government missed this obvious shortfall.
The honourable member for Selkirk-Interlake Eastman.
I think we are all shocked to find out that the government had spent the past 8 years talking about drones and never, ever crossed their minds that they would have to be capable of flying in the Arctic to do the surveillance that we need to do. One thing to have radar sat, one thing to have North Warning System, one thing to have over-the-horizon radar systems, but having the drones flying up there, eyes on the ground at all times, and doing that surveillance is one thing that has proven itself over and over again as being very, very effective. And for the government not to even think that we had to fly in very cold temperatures in the Arctic just talks to the incompetence of this Liberal government.
Grey-Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Another quick question for my colleague. What really scares me about the Arctic, more than, it's not the territorial threat, it's not the threat from Russia or China coming across the Arctic Circle or coming into our north. It's actually about their investments and takeover of our natural resources, our critical minerals, and what more does this member think needs to be done, and as outlined, I believe, in recommendation 18 of the report, to actually put a stop to this malign foreign takeover of critical capabilities and natural resources in the Arctic?
Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, the article that I quoted before, CISA's warning Inuit leaders about covert foreign investment in Arctic documents show what can we do about it. There's a lot that we can do about it. And again, the example that I thought was, again, it's one of those sad things I had to announce when I was up in Yellowknife speaking, was here's a company that the Prime Minister was at, the one rare earth metals project that he cut the ribbon at was going into bankruptcy. Why? Because we have such a regulatory regime that's so burdensome that it pushes those local investors out. And guess who has a way in? Then foreign investment comes in because of that desperation, as Natan Obed said in this document, and we're just inviting in this foreign investment. We're in a sad state. Meanwhile, we have elements and materials that we could be bringing to the world. One of the most green countries on the planet, Canada, could be offering solutions around the globe, but yet here we are.